Our adventures within the city of Nace now behind us, we began to travel northeast away from the capital and into new territory, the Nararian Plains, several weeks' march away to the northeast. Naturally, the experience of the past few days weighed heavily on our minds, the attack of the Hellions as well as the conflict between the humans and the feline quite disturbing. Indeed, it didn't take long before we started talking about it. Not to be pessimistic, but racial justice is never gained overnight, Huelsman began. I doubt much will change in Nace over the short term. They will need to figure it out quickly, Cartha returned, always a voice of reason. So long as they can learn how to forgive, everything else should fall into place. I am sure Healer Priest Feria will help keep the peace, Sainairs added, his confidence in her absolute. She has the trust of both sides. I don't think it's a matter of trust, Huelsman replied, not swayed by Cartha or Sainairs. Those in positions of power or wealth are loath to give up even a tiny amount of that. I just don't see things getting any better. Disagreeing with Huelsman, I expressed my belief that what had been started in Nace now had a very real chance for success, and that, fairly soon, the humans and feline would learn how to live with one another and find a way to peacefully coexist. At least I had hoped so. A few hours later, a lone figure was spotted marching toward my party from the northeast along the road. The shorter figure appeared to be carrying a large pack on his back and was using a long wooden staff to walk with. Soon the figure was just several dozen feet away, revealing himself to be an older dwarf who was not a threat. Most of my heroes carefully examined the humanoid as he reached us, looking for any clues as to who the dwarf was or why he was here. Well met, dwarf, Ariana began, her eyes darting all about the traveler. You seem to be on a long journey, what brings you to Nace? The dwarf reached us and stopped, a bit winded as he leaned on his wooden staff for support. Retrieving a long handkerchief, the demi-human dabbed his forehead, then put the colorful item back into a pocket before addressing us. The name is Vatril, and I have news you may want to hear. But first, can you spare a waterskin or two? A rather unexpected but mundane request, I pulled out one of the skins I had just purchased back in Nace and handed it to the dwarf, Vatril apparently quite thirsty. Thanks mightily. The dwarf responded, consuming the waterskin with a few gulps. You seem dehydrated, Cartha observed. Have you been traveling long? About 3 weeks now, Vatril responded as the waterskin was completely emptied. I hail from Blue, the capital city of the Cyan Desert to the north, are you familiar with it? Yes, Blue, the dwarven capital of the Cyan Desert, Redfern offered, aware of the city. A splendid oasis in the middle of a large desert, its supply of water so vast that it flows like tears down the city's power tower. The dwarf paused a moment, then continued with his important news. All the water stopped flowing within Blue, the city has gone dry. That's never happened before, and everyone there is in a panic. I was one of the first to leave, but crossing the desert is dangerous, most remain trapped and are dying of thirst. How did an entire city find water in the desert in the first place? Huelsman questioned, surprised. Blue had all the water it needed for centuries, Vatril responded. Why it suddenly vanished is a complete mystery, perhaps a mystery the lot of you would be keen on solving. Is there an official reward involved? I asked, the situation suddenly quite intriguing. A reward? Vatril responded, surprised. I suspect that if you can restore water to Blue, you can have anything you'd want. Oh Lord Hefralin is incredibly wealthy, money is no object, I am sure. It seems this desert city should be our next destination, Sainairs commented, relatively quiet until now. How, exactly, do we get there? Take this road northeast for a week, the dwarf responded, pointing back the way he came. You'll reach an intersection, take that road due west into the desert for another 2 weeks or so and you will arrive in Blue. Is there anything more we should know about? I inquired. Yeah. When you reach the road leading west, be careful of all the bandits in the area. They've set up camp all around the intersection, so you won't be able to avoid them. They'll want a toll from you for passing through, mind your manners and they won't rough you up too bad. Bandits? Huelsman scoffed, not impressed. Maybe we'll demand a toll from them. Ariana chuckled, enamored with Huelsman's confidence and dry humor. Then I will be on my way, Vatril announced, stepping forward again and in the direction of Nace. Best of luck to all of you, do me and my fellow dwarven brethren proud. Using my intuition to gauge the sincerity of Vatral during the conversation, I felt there was no doubt that the dwarf was quite sincere during his brief time with us. Hence, I was confident that his story was legitimate and that we needed to reach Blue as soon as possible. Taking about a week to march through the southeastern corner of the Cyan Desert, we eventually reached a makeshift camp, dozens of tents, several shoddy buildings and a variety of wagons standing about. Up ahead, a second road intersected with the first, the second leading due west and into the heart of the Cyan Desert. To get to it, however, meant having to pass through the crowded camp. Dozens of humans, some dwarves, and even a few half-orcs wandered about, their bodies dirty and their clothes unkempt, and they didn't look all that happy watching us approach. Hence, we would need to be on our guard as we approached the makeshift settlement. Within a few minutes, a small handful of guards stood between us and the camp beyond, their weapons and armor shoddy but the sentries not men we wanted to engage. Indeed, Eswin drew his blade, just to be safe as we approached. "You ain't the law, here to take us on?" one of the guards asked, clutching his own weapon. "There is hundreds of us and only a few of you." "No, we're not law enforcement," I answered, trying to keep everyone calm. "Right, you don't look like the local law around here," the guard responded, still distrusting but maintaining the peace. "And what brings you through these parts?" "I don't think that's any of your business." Eswin huffed, ready to take on all the humanoids here if it came to that. Indeed, Eswin seemed to intimidate the guards and they quickly changed the topic of conversation. "Sure, your business is your own," another guard responded. "We don't care. Toll is 10 gold to enter the camp, now don't give us any trouble." While the guards here were trying to act tough, I noticed that they were nervous, and it had nothing to do with our party. Sensing that the men here were fearful of something else, I quickly tried to put the observation to our advantage. Grabbing one of the trembling guards by the wrist, the young man pulled away from me in embarrassment, prompting another to speak. "Easy, friend, we're all a little nervous here." "About what?" Redfern inquired, looking about. "Are we in danger?" Several of the guards wanted to say something, but the others apparently wanted to keep it a secret. Our stares of interest and concern slowly convinced the guards to speak, however, the men looking all about first to make sure the conversation was private. "We're not allowed to openly talk about it, but weird things are going on. Men not showing up for work, muffled cries of others who then go missing, wounds suddenly appearing on those who were asleep. We think it's the curse of Khaldun come to haunt us." "That's enough," the guard leader exclaimed, abruptly ending the conversation. "There'll be no more talk of curses here. On your way, travelers." The sentries then fell silent, leaving us with a useful clue. The guards then waved us into their camp, apparently foregoing the standard 10 gold piece toll. Looking north, we could see how a smaller road led away to the west from the main road, that was most likely the way to Blue. Around the intersection of the two roads was a small collection of tents and crudely developed buildings where we could gain access to a local merchant, smithy, tavern, and so forth. The bandits walking about the camp continued to eye us warily, but it seemed that we were generally free to go where we wished. Gazing into the camp for a few minutes, I noticed that even for a small camp occupied by bandits, thieves, cutthroats and the like, the people here seemed extremely depressed, as if they had accepted the fact that they were all doomed. Hence, I couldn't help but feel sorry for the humanoids here and wondered if there was any help for them. The party growing a little restless, I then ordered them forward and directly into the bandit camp ahead. Nestled just to the east of the intersection of the two roads here within the bandit camp, we reached a small and dilapidated old tent serving as the local merchant. Entering the shoddy construction, a human woman soon hailed the party, ready to buy and sell as we wished. Having just spent a week crossing the desert, we restocked on food and water along with a few other minor supplies. The transactions complete, I then asked the woman if she knew anything about the loss of water within the capital city of Blue to the west. "There has been a small exodus from the city as of late," the merchant began, a bit irritated. "Those dwarves were always a little too proud if you ask me, building such a massive city in the middle of a desert and squandering their water by letting it fall from the top of their power tower. They thought the water would never run out, but nothing lasts forever." Recognizing a few extra gold coins would loosen her tongue even more, I dropped a few on the counter and encouraged the woman to continue. The dwarves of blue are haughty and arrogant, and they'll never admit to anything being wrong even if the entire city is at risk. Young Lord Huelsman is the worst of the lot, he all but owns the city, but don't trust anything he says. The merchant looked me in the eye, then turned away, having said all she was going to say. Our needs with the merchant satisfied, we crossed the intersection outside and quickly reached the encampment smithy. Entering one of the largest buildings within the bandit camp, we encountered all sorts of weapons, suits of armor, shields and other objects related to combat and the general defense of a combatant. A moment later, an incredibly muscular human appeared from beyond a simple counter and hailed us, ready to buy and sell. While the quality of the weapons and armor was rather dubious, we nonetheless purchased a few items, sold even more and acquired some ammunition as well, the overall transaction taking several minutes. Are you familiar with the Curse of Khaldun? Redfern unexpectedly asked the smithy, surprising me. The smithy stopped for a moment, looked Redfern straight in the eye, then continued. He was a powerful necromancer here a few years ago. When several of the locals went missing, only to return as undead monsters, we finally had enough, and we attacked him in his small chapel a few hours to the north. With his dying breath, he swore a curse on us, that he would one day rise again. And now, some wonder if the curse has come true. Damn necromancers! Eswin hissed, disgusted by the story. I will smite this Khaldun myself if he still lives. The smithy nodded his head, trusting that our party could finish what had been started some time ago. Adjacent to the intersection of the two roads within the bandit camp, a small tavern here seemed somewhat better constructed and featured half a dozen tables and chairs for those looking to dine, imbibe, and otherwise pass the time. Hence, we decided to try our luck with the bandit tavern and stepped inside. While the bartender and waiter staff all seemed dour and even intimidating, a few gold coins were all it took to be seated, sated, and listening for rumors, and it didn't take long before we heard our first, I am telling you, Uncle Willie is undead now. He disappeared the night before last, then last night returned home a shadow of himself and reeking of death. I know what a zombie is, and Uncle Willie is one now. An hour later, we eavesdropped on another rumor between two older women. It's said that before Khaldun was put to the sword, he attracted a small army of the faithful to care for and protect him. Most of them were destroyed along with Khaldun, but maybe a few survived and are now trying to bring Khaldun back from beyond the grave. One of the bandit guards then interrupted the conversation with an alarming comment of his own. I've fought skeletons before, normally a good club can take them down in 1 or 2 swings. But these crimson skeletons that have been attacking lately, it can take a dozen strikes before they stay down. It's almost as if they regenerate or something. Clearly, something was amiss here within the bandit encampment. Peering off to the southwest, we noticed a large tent off by itself and decided to investigate. Entering the older, dirty, and blood-stained tent, we found all the makings of a field surgeon's quarters, with several cots on the floor, bandages everywhere and a variety of liquor bottles standing about, some still full but many empty and even tipped over. The tent reeked with the stench of decay, and my party, especially the clerics, found the interior disgusting. Indeed, looking about, the full magnitude of the sad, painful, even horrifying way the bandits here in the camp lived their lives suddenly hit me like a slap in the face, the men routinely sewn back together again after receiving their grievous injuries out in the field. Yes, I had become used to pain and bloodshed as well, but at least we were blessed with several clerics who could patch us back together in mere moments with their healing magic, rather than through the barbaric surgeries performed here within this tent. What do you all want? A gruff, older voice came from the far corner of the tent. Moments later, an older dwarf lumbered toward us, a blood-stained apron hanging from his waist. Bits of blood were stuck in his long beard and his right eye didn't seem functional anymore. The last person I would want helping me if in need of surgical care, I wasn't sure how to respond. An adventuring party, humph. The dwarf spit, not impressed. Come back later, I am busy. All but ignoring the surgeon, we took a quick look around, and it didn't take long before we found something horrible. Back where the field surgeon had first approached us, we found a human bandit lying on one of the cots, drenched in blood, shivering violently and moaning almost like a ghost. The human was obviously dying and my thoughts turned from search to rescue. Leave him be, the dwarven surgeon commanded, joining us alongside the gravely wounded soldier. Hell soon pass from the living to the unliving. Saint stepped alongside the victim, examining his wounds and preparing to treat him. As Saint Aers grabbed his holy symbol and began a spell, the dwarven surgeon seized his hand and stopped him, ordering the cleric to stand down. I said, "Leave him be, just watch and learn." Before our eyes, the human bandit passed from life to unlife, suddenly growing long, sharp nails, fangs and hair. Moments later, the transformation was complete, the human now a monstrous white. Retrieving a large vial of clear, watery liquid from one of his soiled pockets, the surgeon showed it to me and then poured the contents down the throat of the newborn white. Immediately, the monster spit the substance out, the water acting as a strong acid and all but melting the face and throat of the creature, destroying it. The spectacle was quite disturbing, and I turned back to the field surgeon, wondering for a moment if he was responsible for what we had all just witnessed. However, while the scene before us was painful to watch, and I wanted to blame the dwarven surgeon in some capacity, my reason told me that he wasn't involved. The bandit must have been bitten by a white recently and changed into a white himself right before our eyes. Indeed, the dwarf had just put the poor human out of his misery, which was a very good thing. He was bitten by a white just hours ago, north of the camp, the surgeon explained, setting the empty vial of holy water on a nearby table. He was already turning into a white when you arrived. I am sorry you had to witness that. And if we had applied healing magic, it would have just prolonged this poor fellow's suffering, Cartha added, now recognizing why the dwarf stopped her and Saint Aers from using their magical healing abilities. This is still a barbaric place, Saint Aers criticized, looking about. I can't imagine trying to heal the sick and wounded in such surroundings. Not all of us can use magic, the surgeon replied, disrespected. While you clerics are off saving the world, some of us are left behind to do the work nobody else wants. You said this man was bitten north of here? Eswin asked, recognizing the potential clue. Aye, an old chapel about 2 hours march due north along the forest line. It was once the home to a necromancer named Khaldun, now it's his death crypt and he's using it to spew out undead. It needs to be destroyed, along with Khaldun and all the monsters he's created. Well, do what we can, Eswin replied, speaking on my behalf. I hate the undead. Then off you go, the dwarven surgeon ordered as he pulled a soiled sheet over the bandit corpse. Just be careful, Khaldun became quite the necromancer and has likely taken on an undead form himself, a wraith, mummy or even lich. You'll have your hands full with him, I reckon. That does not sound good, Cartha commented as we departed the surgeon's tent. We can handle a wraith on our own, but I am not sure about a mummy and I doubt we could defeat a lich. Let's go find out, Eswin added, not afraid. Back outside the surgeon's tent, the sun about to set in the west, we noticed several dozen men off to the east and decided to go ask them about Khaldun and his supposed death crypt. The loose collection of tents, wagons, and carts here was basically home to dozens of bandits, a dirty, decrepit, pitiful place to exist out in the wilderness. The men here seemed both angry and depressed, and our presence didn't appear to be helping. Well, if it isn't some high and mighty adventuring party out to slaughter us bad guys, one of the thieves began, mocking us in his own despair. Well, give you a fight if that's what you want. There were about 10 humans, dwarves, and even half-orcs here, and most of them were slowly reaching for their weapons. Looking to help as well as ask for information, I offered to heal any wounds of the bandits here, a very surprising proposition that, at first, sounded incredulous to the men. I nodded, then Saint Aers and Cartha got to work, treating the sick and injured with their healing magic. Now that I had the full attention of the various ruffians, I decided to ask about the bandits themselves and why they were here. One of the men just treated by Saint Aers and Cartha then boldly stepped forward, appreciative of the healing provided and willing to divulge a few secrets. We're not terrible people, the bandit began, seemingly honest. We're just trying to survive, like everyone else. We take a few coins from travelers along the road here, we steal a little from the richer farms there. None of us like this way of life, but it's all we have. Actually, maybe there is something you can do for us, a bandit dwarf suggested. Something is attacking us late at night, picking us off one by one, dragging us into the shadows. Put a stop to that, and maybe our leader Xerxes will think about having us move on. It sounded like the bandits here might be willing to relocate if we could determine what has been attacking them and perhaps rescue their kidnapped brethren as well. Of course, I would need to first talk to someone in charge of the bandits here. The initial human bandit we had just talked to pointed north, indicating that we should head in that direction. As we headed north, we quickly discovered several guards standing watch, but who were apparently guarding nothing. Curious, I approached the guards to find out more. "Move along, travelers," one of the guards called out. "You have no business here." Reaching the guards, I then noticed at our feet what appeared to be a wooden door or grate, crisscrossing slats of wood that allowed us to peer down into a shallow pit below. "They're holding pits," Ariana recognized. "I think I see 3 of them." "Who's there?" A muffled voice came from one of the pits, both anxious and angry. The guards then drew their weapons, they clearly didn't want us involved. Nonetheless, I asked the guards about the apparent prisoner below. "He's a dwarven thief," the second guard returned, at least willing to answer my question. "We caught him sneaking into the chieftain's tent, now we're not sure what to do with him." "Don't you know who I am?" The voice called out from below again. "Get me out of here, now. Shut your trap, you old, goofy dwarf." The second guard shouted, annoyed. "We don't care who you are. I am not that old." The voice returned, insulted. "Set me free, and I will show you a thing or two. Is someone up there with you?" The voice called again, hoping for benefactors. 1,000 gold to whoever sets me free." "You're not going free." The first guard shouted again, quite annoyed now. "You tried to steal from us, a band of thieves. We're not going to forget that." 1,000 gold? Ariana asked, innocently intrigued. "Is he serious?" "The dwarf has been saying that since we imprisoned him," the guard responded. "The old bird does not have a copper to his name. I told you, I lost it all in the desert on my way here." The voice again called from below, a little embarrassed. "Let me out, and I will tell you all about it. Save it for someone who cares." The second guard called down, tired of the conversation. A moment passed. Sainairs then stepped to me, something on his mind. The dwarf said something about the desert. Maybe he knows what's going on in blue. What can be done to free the dwarf? I asked the guards, remaining calm and neutral. "We can't just free the dwarf. But, since you're asking nicely, I suppose there is no harm with asking him a few questions." The men then opened the gate and hauled the hapless dwarf back to the surface. His hands bound behind his back, the dwarf resisted his captors, not happy with his current predicament. Still, being above ground was better than in the pit, so the dwarf seemed less grumpy. "A few questions, no more," the first guard instructed, still holding the rope used to lower and raise captives from the pit. "Mighty obliged," the dwarf began, taking his first real look at our party. "It's hotter than the dragon's lair down there. Are you, by chance, from Blue?" Sainairs inquired, getting straight to the point. "Am I?" the dwarf responded, almost enthusiastic. "I am Prince Hebrami, grandson of Lord Hefralin himself. How dare these hooligans treat me like this?" The guards just rolled their eyes, not buying the dwarf's story. My first impression, however, was that Prince Hebrami was a likable dwarf who was in a bit of trouble, and I definitely wanted to hear him out. My caravan was attacked by giant ant lions crossing the desert, and I lost everyone and everything. By the time I reached this miserable camp, I had gone without food or drink for days. A dwarf is entitled to his sustenance, right? "Not within the chieftain's private tent," the second guard announced, still not interested. "Never mind that," Sainairs continued. "Was Blue in trouble when you left? Do you know what's going on there?" "You mean the water shortage afflicting our beautiful city?" The dwarf responded, quite aware of what was happening there. "We've always had more water than what we needed. Then, a few weeks ago, bam! All the water is suddenly gone, and nobody knows why. I came for help, and then these good-for-nothing vagrants caught me." "All right, enough talk," the first guard commanded, about to toss the dwarf back down into the pit. Prince Hebrami turned back to me, his anger and frustration now tempered perhaps with the anxiety of being dropped into the hot, suffocating holding pit again. "Wait. Heroes, please. My grandfather would pay a huge ransom for my safe return. Get me out of here, return to Blue with me, and I will make all of you rich." Hearing this, the guards stopped what they were doing and looked at me, unsure of my intentions. "Would 250 gold pieces be enough to buy the dwarf's freedom?" I asked. Likely not seeing 250 gold pieces throughout an entire year, the guards were more than happy to ransom a single, hapless, desperate dwarf. Within moments the deal was done, my purse a little lighter, but Prince Hebrami turned over to our care. You have my eternal gratitude, friends. Prince Hebrami said as the guards untied him, then went about their business, glad to be done with all of us. Before we part ways, do you have a few more gold pieces you can share so I can equip, arm and feed myself? First, how do we collect that huge ransom you said your grandfather would pay for your release? Eswin asked, never willing to just trust a stranger's word. Maybe you should return to Blue with us. That would not be a good idea, the dwarf returned, surprising us. There are things I need to do before I can return. Now, about that loan? Hebrami's story didn't sound entirely plausible. In fact, I was pretty sure the dwarf was lying to us about something, I just wasn't sure what. I probably still did the right thing by setting him free, but I didn't expect much in return. If you make it to Blue and speak to my grandfather, Prince Hebrami continued, tell him what you did for me. If he does not believe you, tell him I named my first dire wolf cub Padfoot, that should convince him you're telling the truth. Padfoot. Got it, Eswin returned, memorizing the name. Now, how much do you need? I can get by with, say, 500 gold pieces. Surely an able party like yours can easily afford that. Yikes. This dwarf had expensive tastes. Not about to surrender 500 gold pieces in addition to the 250 I had just paid, I compromised instead, counting out 200 gold pieces and handing them to Hebrami. Rather surprisingly, the dwarf didn't seem too disappointed with the gift, and I wondered whether he fully expected to be given less than what he asked for anyway. Prince Hebrami bowed deeply, an apparent dwarven custom, then turned and fled the general area, soon out of sight. He was lying to us, wasn't he? Kartha finally added, the cleric quite perceptive. Probably, but it's better to give him the benefit of the doubt, Redfern responded, convinced that I had handled the situation well. Let's go. Located several dozen yards to the northeast of the road intersection here within the camp, we soon came across a modest tent that seemed a little cleaner, straighter and better constructed than all the others, suggesting that someone of importance was camped here. 2 guards stood at the tent's entrance, however, watching us suspiciously as we approached. Move along, the first guard ordered as we reached the tent. You have no business here. It appeared that we had found the leader of the bandits within the camp, but the guards weren't about to allow us in. Accordingly, I offered a 25 gold piece bribe, hoping that would do the trick. You can't buy your way through, the first guard stated, waving off my attempt to bribe him. Now, move along, or we will be forced to rally all the troops here and make you move along. Both guards then raised their weapons and readied themselves for combat, the situation suddenly turning tense, and for several long moments we stood there at an impasse, not sure of what to do. Martins, Jacobs, stand down, both of you. Let them in, a voice then commanded from within the tent, a deep, hoarse voice full of strength and authority. Without taking their eyes off us, the 2 guards reluctantly lowered their weapons and took a step away from the tent's entrance, allowing us passage. My heroes looked to me for approval, and with an affirmative nod Eswin and Ariana led the rest of us into the better constructed tent. The interior was perhaps 20 feet to a side, large enough to accommodate the modest living quarters of the person who I assume commanded the bandits here. A wide variety of personal items and objects lay about, from trunks and cabinets to a small bed in the far corner. Sitting behind a wooden desk was a figure currently concealed in shadow, apparently reviewing several older maps lying atop the desk. Leading my party to the desk, I could see that the rogue before us was dressed in chain armor, his helmet also sitting on the table just a few feet away. What do you want? The figure spoke again, his deep, authoritative voice almost demanding immediate respect. Introducing ourselves, I mumbled something about wanting a word with the bandit leader here in the camp. The figure there at the desk paused and looked up to me, revealing himself to be a half-orc. Standing a little over 5 feet in height, the creature appeared human in almost all aspects except for his skin color, which was decidedly more orcish and something I had never seen before. Likely used to the surprised look on my face, the half-orc quickly commented. What, you've never seen a half-orc before? Suppressing my initial shock, I tried hard to show the half-orc the equality and respect he deserved. After a soft smile and gentle nod, the half-orc returned the gesture, my encounter with him off to a good start. I was told there were adventurers in the camp, the half-orc continued, addressing me directly. I am Xerxes, the leader of the many souls here, and they obey me without question. I hope you haven't come to stir up trouble for us. Why have we come here? Eswin whispered in my ear, unsure himself. Sensing I would only get one chance to respond appropriately, I thought about the men we had encountered back in the barracks and answered that we were here to help if we could. We don't normally receive any help from outsiders, Xerxes responded, unsure about our true motives. Let me guess, you will do something for us if we pick up our camp and move on, is that it? The half-orc looked away for several moments, his mind apparently racing with other thoughts. Xerxes then returned to me, a little more trust in his eyes. Are you familiar with the curse of Khaldun? We're aware, Redfern simply responded, speaking on my behalf. It sounds like you may have an undead necromancer terrorizing your men here. Xerxes looked at me again and continued. We originally made camp here to charge a toll from those passing through, but it's time we moved on, especially with the undead threat north of us. I had been thinking about attacking the ruined chapel where Khaldun was put to death in the hopes of saving a few of my missing men, but you heroes are far better trained and equipped to deal with such a dangerous adversary. If you can destroy the undead yourselves and bring back my missing men, we will pull up camp here and move on. What say you? Yes, of course, we will move out right away, I said with a nod and a grin. Very good. Xerxes responded, apparently confident our party could indeed do the job. The half-orc then stepped over to a small chest tucked away behind his desk, retrieving the worn object and placing it atop his desk. Opening the chest with a simple key from his desk, Xerxes retrieved a collection of glass vials, each filled with a clear liquid. I've been gathering all this holy water in anticipation of an attack on Khaldun's chapel. There are 12 vials here, they're yours to use against the many undead you're sure to face. Xerxes then handed them all to me and soon they were stowed away within my pack. Then we have a deal. Xerxes commanded, stepping toward the sole entrance to his living quarters here to show us out. Go take care of Khaldun and all his undead, and return as many of my men as you can. If you live up to your end of the bargain, we will break camp and move on, you will never see us again. Good luck. And that's a wrap of episode number 20, Plight of the Bandits. Expect additional episodes every few weeks as the story continues.